Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. The Man Who Watched Us Sleep by Anteater Early. I'm from Sri Lanka. I'm 26 years old and I'm a Buddhist. This is my first time sharing something, especially a story like this. It's about the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me, back when I was in high school. I've wanted to write it down for years, but every time I tried, something got in the way. So, here goes. This happened when I was in grade 10 or 11. My younger brother and I shared a bed back then. He was in grade 6 or 7. Before I get into it, let me paint the picture. Our room faced the main Colombo Candy Road. The bed was shoved into a corner, headboard against the wall. At the foot of the bed, there was a tiny gap, maybe 2 feet between us and a wardrobe pressed tight against the wall. On the other side was the door to the room, and right by the door sat an old iron table with one short leg, so if you bumped it, it would wobble and make a loud da-da sound because it didn't really stay steady. Okay, here's where things start. One night, my brother and I climbed into bed around 9:30 or 10. I couldn't sleep. It was hot and sticky, and I was restless. My brother, though, seemed to nod off fast. Through the curtain on our door, I could see the living room light still glowing. And about 30 minutes after we had gotten into bed, my mom, dad, and sisters turned off the lights and went to sleep too. I shut my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. The heat, the sweat, it was brutal. I tried so hard to doze off, but nope. Hours dragged by, maybe 2 or 3, and I was still awake. By then, the road outside was completely quiet, not a single car passing by. And then, out of the blue, I heard it. Footsteps inside the house. Slow, steady steps, like someone in shoes walking on the tiled floor, coming from the living room toward our room. There was no hurry in those steps. They were calm and getting louder and closer. My heart pounded, and the footsteps stopped right at our door. I kept my eyes squeezed shut, too terrified to look, and pulled the sheet over my head like it would protect me. For a bit, everything was dead silent. Then all of a sudden, the table in our room went da-das, like something had bumped it. Now I knew. Someone was there. Forget the heat. I was sweating from pure fear, shaking under my sheet. I wanted to peek, but I was petrified. Finally, I couldn't stand it. Acting like I was asleep, I slid the sheet down and cracked my eyes open just a bit. I couldn't believe it. There was a man sitting on the table. He looked like he was dressed for a job interview. Long pants, a tucked-in long-sleeve shirt. His hair was kind of long, brushing his shoulders. With my eyes half open, I couldn't make out his face clearly, but there he was. One leg up on a chair, the other on the floor, hand on his hip, staring at our bed. I wanted to yell, but my voice was gone. I tried to over and over, and nothing came out. I couldn't even turn to my brother. My body felt like a rock. And panicking, I shut my eyes again and yanked the sheet back over my head. I was trembling now, scared out of my mind. Minutes passed, maybe more, and I didn't hear a sound. My brother shifted in his sleep next to me, but that was it. I had to check again. Still pretending to be out cold, I eased the sheet down and peeked at the table. The man was gone. At first, I felt a flicker of relief, but then I thought, hey, where'd he go? I lowered the sheet more and glanced at the wardrobe by our feet. There he was, standing right at the edge of our bed, looking down on us. He was tall, maybe 6 foot, dressed sharp like before. I knew he was that tall because the wardrobe was 6 feet tall, and he matched its height perfectly. Sweat drenched over me, but I felt ice cold, stuck in place. My brother kept tossing around clueless, and I couldn't even nudge him. My arm wouldn't move. Desperate, I squeezed my eyes shut again, thinking, whatever happens, let it be. But after a while, I forced myself to look. I tilted my head down, cracked my eyes, and checked the foot of the bed. He wasn't there. No sounds anywhere. I glanced over at the table quickly, and it was empty. My heart lightened a bit. Whoever he was gone, I thought. Feeling safer, I fixed my pillow and looked up. And that's when I saw something I'll never forget. Ever. Typing this now, my hands are shaking and my ears feel frozen. I told you our bed was right against the wall, with maybe an inch of space behind it. Nobody could fit there. But when I looked up, there he was, the same long-haired guy perched on the headboard, leaning over me, his face so close to mine, there couldn't have been more than a foot between us. That's all I remember. I think I just blacked out. The next thing I knew, it was morning. My brother wasn't beside me. I was still in bed, and I tried to figure everything out. What had happened last night? Was it a dream or was it real? I was dead sure it was real, but I tried telling myself it was a nightmare just to calm myself down. My head throbbed and I felt feverish, so groggily I stumbled out of bed and went into the living room. It was empty, but I heard my mom and brother chatting in the kitchen. And I went to tell my mom what I'd seen, still half convincing myself it was fake. But what I heard there turned my shaky fever into full-blown chills. My brother was telling my mom, "Amma, last night some guy came into our room. He was by the table first, then he went over to Aya's," Aya means elder brother in my language, "side, and leaned right over his face." I shut my eyes. I was terrified. When I looked again, he was by the wardrobe, and I turned away, too scared to scream, though I tried. Later, I peeked, and he was on the bed, leaning over Aya's face, staring at him. I just kept my eyes shut, and I must have passed out. For a whole month after, we played Buddhist Pirth chants. They're kind of like Christian prayers in our room nonstop. Nothing weird happened again. But get this, before that night, my older sister had told us something too. She said one afternoon while napping, someone grabbed her hair and pulled her off the bed, telling her to get down. We all laughed at that, thinking she was joking. But after what happened to me and my brother, we weren't so sure anymore. Some might believe this is true, and others might say it's nonsense. That's up to you. But I've still got questions that haunt me. How did he lean over me like that without falling? How could anyone have fit into that tiny space behind the bed? And honestly, what was that? For a long time after, I was terrified to sleep. Every time I climbed into bed, I would just lie there, heart racing, scared I'd see that man again, staring down at me in the dark. I Found a Body by The Ghost Walks Through. For a bit of backstory, my husband and I live in an apartment complex with our dog and cat. There is a forest trail behind our complex that leads to a park where we take our dog. This was a weekday, and I was taking our dog for a wee while I was on my lunch break. We took the parking lot to the trail right behind the trash compactor for our apartment complex. This trail is usually empty, so walks don't get interrupted with other people, and the dog can do his business with minimal distraction. It's very scenic, and we have come across owls, bald eagles, squirrels, and the like. The wind goes through the pine trees, and we can occasionally hear cars go by on the main road ahead. It didn't take long for me to realize that something was different on this day. We had gone down the trail and stopped at the main road, turned around, and started to head back home. Just then, the wind seemed to suddenly stop, and I couldn't hear the birds that were so loud just a moment ago. It was almost like the silence was loud. That's when I saw it, and I had already walked past it. A man laying on his back 10 feet away in the ivy. Honestly, at first it didn't even register to me that this was a person. So I stopped, and I turned around. His eyes were open, his teeth were broken, and he was missing the back of his head. Now my dog was spooked and somehow wiggled out of his harness. This man was dead. I called 911, and the operator asked if I had a defibrillator in my apartment that I could go grab and come back. I said no, but that he was definitely deceased. The operator asked again, "Are you sure? Check, please." And that was the first time I was ever made to touch a corpse. I relayed back to her, "No, there is no pulse, and he is missing most of his head." As I backed away, I could see copious amounts of blood that I hadn't noticed at first. It was soaked into the earth beneath him. While waiting for cops to arrive, I noticed that he had a box next to him. This must have been the box he brought the gun in. He had his glasses neatly folded and had placed them on top of the gun box. He didn't look any more than 50, and I will never go in the woods again. Satanic Rituals Next to My Summer Vacation Home by Chris Wilson's Hostage. This story takes place in the Algarve, a highly popular tourist region in southern Portugal, in a very isolated family house where my cousin, my mom, my aunt, my grandparents, and I vacationed every summer. It was a beautiful, fairly large house designed by my grandfather himself, and the property included a medium-sized fenced terrain where my cousin and I often played during our childhood. The events I'm about to recount took place around 2012, when I was 12 and my cousin was 9. Despite the many happy childhood memories I have of the house, it always gave me an unsettling vibe that left me feeling a bit on edge. Every year when we visited, I would experience a recurring nightmare, sometimes multiple times per stay. The dream always took place in the house and revolved around my cousin and me trying to escape to call for help after realizing several masked men dressed in all black had intruded onto the property. Despite frequently waking up in a cold sweat, I didn't give the dream much more importance. I was a fairly rational kid and had multiple different recurring dreams before, although not as frequent, so I didn't find it particularly strange. The summer of 2012, the familiar nightmare returned as expected, but this time it left me feeling especially anxious and paranoid. I felt compelled to check around the perimeter of the fence, precisely where I had seen the intruders in my dream. As the responsible older cousin, I made sure to ask for permission to roam outside the fenced area. I can't recall whether I made up an excuse or was upfront about wanting to check if the fence was broken, but my family dismissed it as typical kids being curious. They allowed us to explore as long as we didn't go far, since the nearest house was more than a 15-minute walk away. Before heading out, I went inside to grab a bottle of water, given the unbearable 40°C heat, and a small Swiss Army knife, just in case. Then my cousin and I set off to inspect the perimeter. We started from the right of the entry gate, and by then my anxiety had been replaced by an adventurous spirit, and the false sense of security any 12-year-old would feel from carrying a knife, no matter how small. To the right of the property stood a small, completely collapsed ruin of a house from the 1970s or so. It caught our attention since we had always been curious about it. But then after a brief glance, we lost interest. The roof had caved in, and there wasn't much to see, so we moved along. The rest of the walk was uneventful. We played with sugar canes we found near a small creek, goofing around and enjoying ourselves. Eventually, we decided to head back inside to play video games. Until I saw something strange. About 20 to 30 meters from the property, near the left side of the gate, something white on a stick glistened in the sunlight. Intrigued, I walked over to take a closer look. And the moment I realized what I was looking at, I was frozen and panicked. My younger cousin wasn't as alarmed, likely due to being a bit younger, but I instantly knew something was deeply wrong. It was a half-decomposed goat head impaled on a stick. In hindsight, it wasn't fresh. It must have been drying in the sun for ages, as what remained was mostly just the skull and patches of dried skin. I told my cousin we needed to go back, and we bolted straight to the house to warn our family. They went to check it out, but refused to talk about it afterward. At the time, I had no knowledge of satanic rituals, so I didn't fully grasp what I had seen. It wasn't until years later that my mom explained that the skull was indeed there, but more than that, there were traces of candle wax in several spots forming a circle around it, indicating that a ritual sacrifice had likely taken place. When I asked if anything else strange had happened there, she admitted that while they never found anything as disturbing as the goat head, they had repeatedly noticed areas where the tall dried grass near the property had been flattened in perfect circles, as if a dozen or so people had sat down together. We eventually had to sell the house due to financial issues, but to be completely honest, I don't entirely regret it. The unsettling feeling I had there never truly went away, and neither did the nightmares. It was always just beneath the surface, lurking. Now, keep in mind, all this stuff took place really close to the property, and given the very low density of houses in that area, they could have done it in a million other places and we would have never known it, making it really seem like they were particularly targeting our property. This was made even sketchier by the fact that where they had done those things, it would have been very easy to spot a person from the house, making me think they most likely scouted out the property to check if someone was home. From that day forward, every time I stepped outside to go to the pool or walk around the terrain, I felt exposed. The house itself felt somewhat safe as, given the isolation, it had to have strong metal blinders placed around every window, which we secured every night. I still get goosebumps thinking about that place, and looking back, those nightmares weren't very normal given how often and for how long they recurred. Personally, I think it was my subconscious giving me a warning that something was up. Maybe I had seen something else around the property when I was younger, and my brain just processed the information that way. I honestly don't know, but my dreams stopped after selling the house, and I haven't thought about it in years. Now, I just pity the guys that bought the property and hope they don't experience what we did. My Paranormal Story, submitted by Gerald Lamb, Vancouver. I had just turned 40, and I had a relatively healthy, active lifestyle. I ate right, I worked out 5 times a week, and had a busy schedule at work as a very busy hairstylist. Looking back at things in hindsight, I already started to get subtle symptoms of an illness onset, but at the time I didn't know what it was. Prior to turning 40, in the past 5 years, I would get subtle symptoms like a flash fever that would last moments and then go away, chronic low-grade headaches, and I would feel super fatigued. I would also have short bouts of being dizzy, and all of these things occurred randomly, so I just chalked it up to lack of sleep, being super busy at work. But then, whatever it was started to affect my vision, and I started getting these weird auras. But I still didn't think anything was wrong with me. It was early September of 2010, and I remember this day like it happened yesterday. I got up from bed, but was just so winded that I had to sit on the edge of the bed to catch my breath. That and feeling dizzy at the same time, I finally got my energy up to get ready for work, and I made my lunch, packed my computer, and off I went to the car as my partner was driving me to work that morning. As we were driving, apparently I passed out a few times, and my partner knew something was wrong and drove me to the local hospital. When we arrived at the hospital emergency room, I was admitted immediately as they checked my heart rate, and it was off the charts. I was dizzy, feeling really fatigued, and I didn't realize I had a gray pallor complexion. I was taken in immediately and was placed in an examination room and was told to wait there for a doctor. My partner left at that time as he had some errands to run, so I waited and waited. Then a doctor came in to examine me, and I still remember this doctor that came in. He was of African descent, about 5'9" and about mid-40-ish, and he wore these rather large, shiny, gold-rimmed spectacles, reminiscent of the style from the 70s. I thought to myself, how unusual is that for someone to be wearing that style of spectacles? Are they in fashion again, I thought? They were so shiny gold, they were actually sparkling. And even as sick as I was, I still had my faculties, and it wasn't because the illness was affecting my eyesight. So he examined me, and to my shock, his hands were ice cold. He went through all the medical rounds and said to me not to worry and that everything was going to be okay. And then he left, never to return. I was then admitted to the hospital where I stayed for almost 2 months before being diagnosed with a rare form of B-cell lymphoma. Only 2% of diagnosed cases survive this type of cancer, and I was in stage 4. After going through 3 rounds of chemo, and this was late December now after Christmas, the chemo didn't work, and I started getting tumors in my abdomen. The oncologist decided to ramp up the chemo and the dosage, and it would be much higher and more aggressive. So aggressive with the first treatment, I lost all feeling in my legs, hands, and arms and could no longer walk without assistance or a walker. I was told I would never be able to do hair again, and that I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. And I was also told that if this more aggressive chemo didn't work, I'd have about a month to live. I had to accept this as my fate. I mean, what can you do when a doctor tells you that? Well, I had a spiritual awakening and accepted my fate. I do believe in miracles, and within about a week, the tumors in my abdomen went away. So I continued with this second series of aggressive chemotherapy. By the end of the chemo at the hospital, I found out I was fast-tracked to get a bone marrow transplant at another hospital. So the time came for me to transfer to the new place where they had an extensive bone marrow transplant center. Prior to being transferred, I spoke with the head nurse of the floor as I wanted to give thanks for those that really took care of me. And I asked the nurse if I could speak to the African doctor that saw me in the emergency department when I first came in. This nurse had worked at the hospital for more than 30 years. She looked at me with a puzzled look on her face. She knew everyone in the ER, and she told me that there was no such person that worked in the ER. I mean, oh my God, was I visited by an angel or a ghost? I mean, the apparition that visited me was in physical form. He touched my wrist to check my pulse. I was shocked and amazed. After my bone marrow transplant, it was a success, and I beat stage 4 rare lymphoma, and I am now in full remission. Looking back now, the apparition that showed itself to me said that I would be okay and to not worry. I never thought I was going to die from this illness, as that's what I always thought, despite the harshness of the treatments and the side effects. I always knew from that incident that it was going to be the hardest thing to go through, but that I would also not die. I beat stage 4, a rare form of lymphoma, and am now in full remission, and I don't use a wheelchair as my hands and legs are now usable, and I've even gone back to work. Uncle Josh note, that's a wonderful, wonderful story. I'm glad you got through that. Obviously, stage 4 is no joke. Glad you're alive and very thankful that you could share that story with us. Miracles happen, man. I believe that you're living proof of that. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Guys, I apologize for this episode being a little bit shorter than what I normally do, and I will say probably expect that a little bit later this week as well. A number of changes in my life are happening right now that are taking up a lot of my time, so as much as I want to make sure that you're still getting fresh content, it's going to be a little bit difficult for the next few days or so. All is well, no worries, all good stuff. Just in case any of you were worried, which I know you weren't. But thanks for listening anyway. Hey, if you're checking this out on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. It does help out the algorithm. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing that as well. And leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought of the stories. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Follow me on social media. And of course, if you'd like to take your support of what I'm doing a step further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description. And consider purchasing some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my storefront at tpublic.com is in the description as well. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.